Hi, Paige. Thanks for helping my project. Could you say a little bit about yourself?
Hey, good day to you, Nathan. Yes, certainly. So my name's Paige, and I'm the co-founder of Frontier DAO. So that's Frontier Decentralized Autonomous Organization. And one of our focuses is on space exploration. So we're actually, of all the DAOs that exist now, we were actually the fourth to be stood up that focused on science, and then actually the first that took the bold step of focusing on space exploration and also fusion energy and also climate solutions. So,
Well, what got you into DAOs?
what got me into looking further into decentralized autonomous organizations was that I recognized that there were some very innovative funding structures and models that DAOs were incorporating and doing quite well at. Notwithstanding the hacks that do happen sometimes. But if you make your architecture secure, then you can sort of, systems engineer against that. But to the larger point is that I have a contracting company. And so through that, I was looking at a lot of, I was submitting a lot of proposals, to RFPs that, and believe it or not, I am not a nuclear physicist, nor am I an aerospace or astrophysicist engineer, nothing of this sort. But there were some RFPs coming out of NASA that did that my qualifications could speak to, which was actually, namely, the one that came out in 2020 was telling the Artemis story to a worldwide audience. And once I did a deep dive into that, once I got over my fear of like, who me? I can make a proposal in response to a NASA solicitation. What? So anyway, I kind of got over that with some coaching of, don't tell yourself no, kind of a thing. And I realized that different funding sources could actually really further this push in space exploration to speak to a much broader audience. So not just the funnel of SBIRs and STTRs, which are the federal government seed funding sources. And then that scary route of going to venture capital, which, you have to know how to put together a deal deck and all not just a deck, but, like a deal plan and all that. Who's on your cap table? I mean, if you don't have an MBA, who speaks that language? So that's really what got me looking at alternative funding sources. And I'll stop with just the caveat that about 4 months after we formed, so we formed in late summer 2021, something called Constitution DAO was stood up, which was the unified mission to buy the United States Constitution, one of the only remaining signed copies. And within the course, they stood up within a course of a week, and 2 weeks later they had raised $47 million. So that was a bit of an encouragement for us. I'm not going to go into the story that happened after that when they lost the bid for the Constitution. That's another chapter. But still, it was very encouraging. We thought if they could do that for the Constitution, why can't we do that for space exploration?
What is a decentralized autonomous organization?
Nathan, that actually is a good question, because everyone in the space is actually still defining it, to be very honest. But mainly what it is it's a way to self-organize a talent base and a skills base that is remote and global. So for example, if you want to automate human resources, what you do is you can use a DAO, and within the smart contracts that you set up, so basically within the established agreements between people, everything is automated. So say, for example, you have certain qualifications and skills. And once you have put in a certain number of months or maybe completed a certain level of projects, boom, then you're bumped up to the next tier. So what it means is that it's not somebody, it kind of removes the need for HR and payroll on a very fundamental level. Because it's written into the smart contract, it's not somebody in HR kind of going, well, this person's performance level was this or that or the other. It's basically automated. Is that if you do an acceptable on a project, if you submit acceptable work at a certain level, on time, on deadline, you have your deliverables, then boom, it's just automatic. It's like, you put the coin in the slot and boom, you get to the next level. It's a little bit, I don't want to use gamification analogy too much, but it's automated. Yeah. So it's taking that need, and payroll is automated as well. Everybody that works on our teams, they pay themselves. So we have a shared wallet, which in DAO vernacular is called a multi-sig, so multi-signature wallet. So it's basically a wallet that, say, we'll have a project, we'll get some funding for the project, we'll put those funds in this designated wallet. Everyone who's at the core team has signatory responsibility and privileges. And so when it's time for them to pay themselves, whether we've set it up where it's every 2 weeks or every 4 weeks, then they just access the wallet and pay themselves. And because everything is on chain and transparent, if there's any anomalies, everybody's going to see, right? So if you're paying yourself 3 times when you should have only paid yourself once, you're going to get found out right away. On the same token, if you're not paying yourself, that's going to be transparent as well. So it's a lot of the honor system, but because everything is transparent and on chain, so all the transactions can be verified on chain by anybody. Like anybody can access. There's no black holes as we know them to be, say, in banking or checking accounts, because everybody actually has access to this information. So at a very basic level, and not talking about the whole governance aspects and stuff, which is a large part of DAOs, but at a very basic level for project management, it's fabulous because everything is automated and people are expected to basically act as adults. And if you're hired to do something, you're expected to perform and you pay yourself for your performance, and your deliverables are expected to be there when it had been agreed upon. So.
Well, that sounds really magical. Yeah, I mean, acceptable performance is always a slippery thing. Who decides what's acceptable? It's always been a challenge, like delivery. I know oftentimes in organizations I've been in, just coming to a common agreement about what done means seems to be challenging.
Yeah, true. Well, there you're kind of touching a little bit on the malleableness of governance. And so within DAOs, there is also a very strong governance aspect, like the community votes to, approve or disapprove certain actions. But again, you can fine tune that and make it smaller groups of people. So say people devoted to a certain project or something. And then on that, you can have on-chain voting where your vote actually goes straight into the smart contract. So there's a smart contract set up that if you vote a certain way, then, if X, then Y, kind of a thing. And you can't change that. If the vote goes one way or the other, you can't do anything. It's on chain. It's in a smart contract. There's no undoing those. There's another way, though, too, that a lot of people have employed, especially in the last couple of years, which is off-chain voting, using something called platforms. One of the more popular ones is called Snapshot. And so that's basically a facsimile of on-chain voting. So if you're deciding on if a project is done or not, that's actually a really good way that's a very good method to use, because then you can put forth, say, okay, is this project done, to say the community or the members of that project, right? That sub guild. that sub DAO. And then they can say yes, or they can say no, not quite, or they can say no. And so depending on then how the votes sort of, tally out, then you can then make revisions on that and say, hey, Mr. Talent or Mr. or Ms. Talent, X, you need to do this, this, and that before we actually feel that it's done or that it's met the requirements and the deliverables that we need. And then that voting is kind of like soft voting. It's sort of like soft decisions. So it's not on chain. So it doesn't mean that it's not irreparable. it's malleable. So there's a couple ways to, there's actually quite a diverse number of ways now to implement governance and to sort of carry out these tasks. People have gotten very, very innovative when it comes to how to manage a DAO. But I think at the core is that people just kind of want to promote autonomy and sort of self-responsibility.
That is interesting. It'd be interesting to see how these evolve over the next few years and decades, and what form they might be later on. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Some things that I read say everything is going to be a DAO. Right now, I'm very engaged in the public goods sector, and so there are a lot of big thinkers who are much more learned and more passionate about the sector than even I am, who do feel that any kind of nonprofit work or public goods funding can easily transition into being a DAO. Very interestingly, an announcement just came out yesterday where one of the big ecosystem funders called Gitcoin, they've been using something called quadratic funding. Talk about magic. Quadratic funding is really a magic formula. It's crowdfunding, but using matching funds. I won't go into it, but UNICEF. So that's been used in the ecosystem, in the Ethereum ecosystem, for like the last about 5 or 6 seasons. So about 3 years now. UNICEF has just partnered with Gitcoin to test out them taking that protocol as an open protocol. So UNICEF is partnering now with Gitcoin to do a quadratic funding round using fiat too, so not using crypto. So this is going to be a huge test case. It's extremely exciting, because if this is if UNICEF proves that this is doable, then I think that a ton of nonprofits and NGOs are going to pile into this space. Yeah,
It's gonna be interesting. It's amazing how our world is ever changing.
Yeah, that's a very wise statement.
Well, I had a few questions about the moon I wanted to ask you. First of all, did you know that NASA is planning to send astronauts back to the moon?
Yes, I did. I'm a huge Artemis enthusiast. Absolutely.
How do you remember how you found out?
I found out by attending a NASA webinar back in the lockdown days. I had sort of heard murmurings of the Artemis mission, but I hadn't put 2 and 2 together. And then it was back like in the dark days of the pandemic, I started attending a ton of NASA stuff online, because they were now available online. And all of a sudden it was like, oh wow, this is a huge deal. This is fabulous. The first woman and first person of color. Oh my goodness. And then the accords with 27 nations. It blew my mind. Yeah.
Did you see the Artemis 1 launch last week?
Oh, I did. Yes, absolutely. That was thrilling. After several scrubs, having it actually take off like that, it was what an historic day. And Charlie Blackwell Thompson, we're going together this time. Wow, what a new era. This is so exciting.
Yeah, it's funny, all the build up for the first two launch attempts, and this one was quietly done at 12:40 in the morning. At least my time. It may have been a lot better your time. I think it would have been what, about maybe 6:40 in the morning for you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it was first thing in the morning. Yeah, it was, which was actually a reasonable time. Yeah, it was funny because NASA had posted that tweet, kind of playing around with, the Taylor Swift album launch. We're going to launch at midnight, and then sure enough they did.
Yeah, and it was really kind of amazing. They still had like a hydrogen leak on the pad in a different spot, and they had to send out a red team. And then they had like some router failure that had to be replaced, and it was a couple of tense moments. So.
Yeah, true. And they're so polished, just kind of, talking through it, and then her getting, her as the first female launch, mission director, getting her tie cut. That was a great ceremony, and just keeping her cool throughout all of it. I mean, wow. Sometimes when I see the jobs that these people do, I realize that my nerves are not made of the same steel that theirs are. So I admire them. I admire them greatly. But I would not want to change places with them.
Well, and I'm not sure how long she had been up, but what I find amazing is their energy level and how they're able to kind of maintain that focus for so long. And it's just a lot of stuff. But what do you think about us going back to the moon?
I actually have spent a lot of time thinking about this, Nathan. And at first I sort of felt like, that's a little nutso. I'll be honest. My childhood was spent scuba diving in the water. So my childhood was not spent necessarily staring up at the moon as other real space kind, as I see them, real space kind people do. But now that I've learned more about it, I really have to say, if we can, then why not? My actually, it's funny because tomorrow, so we're right in the Thanksgiving season. Hopefully that's okay to say. I don't want to date this one way or the other, but my ancestors came over on the Mayflower from England to the United States. And when they did that, Cape Cod was the moon, right? I mean, it could have been, and in fact, it was farther than 3 days. Like right now, we voyage from Earth to the moon. It's like 3 days. It's a 3-day voyage. For people coming from from Old England to New England, that was 3 months, right? So I think it's just a question of of it being relative. It's all relative, and I do appreciate Elon Musk's framing of it, of like, we have this moment in history when humankind can do this. We can achieve being an interplanetary species. So let's take that opportunity. Let's do it. It makes a lot of sense to me now.
I do think it will actually be successful in becoming multiplanetary.
Do I think we'll be successful? I guess that remains to be seen. It seems that even though the moon is so much closer, I've read and heard enough about the potential habitability of Mars that actually seems to be even more logical. I do attend a lot of webinars with the Lunar Surface Innovation Consortium out of Johns Hopkins, and a lot of really smart people. And just in a couple of years, they now have 2,000 members from all over the world. So really, really interesting discussions out of that group. And you have 2,000 of the smartest people on in the aerospace industry and engineering and astrophysicists spending their entire lives focusing on how to make the moon sustainably habitable for humans. With that kind of brain power, I have a lot of confidence that that we will be able to, to do it to some degree. We may not be having 5-star, or 3-star Michelin restaurants, by 2050 on the moon, but I do think that there's going to be a healthy space tourism industry, and I think people at some point, maybe our grandkids, are going to say, hey, yeah, I'm going to take the spouse to the moon for the weekend. Let's get a babysitter for the kids.
Yeah, that'd be fascinating. Wow. Yeah. So I guess if we're going to be successful, what time frame do you think it would take? Like, when will we have our first like settlement on Mars and people are like going there to live permanently?
Oh, that is a very good question. Well, I love watching those futuristic videos on YouTube, that basically puts us there in 20 years or so. I don't, I don't know how to answer that question. I can answer it with sort of another question though, which is, if we are successful at mastering, fusion energy, and then can use fusion energy as a propellant, like they're doing at the Princeton Plasma Labs. They're prototyping a fusion fueled rocket, which would then minimize the voyage from Earth to Mars to, I think they're even saying like down to like a month or something. Then the radiation effects on human beings while in transit, while in zero gravity, are in that atmosphere, will be greatly reduced. So there's a much greater chance that we will be able to actually, walk and maybe build things once we get there. So I think there's a lot of ifs still, but such smart people, just such amazingly intelligent people are just spending their lives focusing on how to do this, and how to do this in a reasonable, say reasonable meaning like say 50-year time frame, right? That I kind of more and more I kind of have really no doubt that we are going to do it. I just don't know what the quality of life is going to be like for people who do venture forth, but
I know, I gotta imagine it's going to be very, very challenging. Not it's going to be like this high-tech poverty type of situation.
I like that. That's funny. I haven't heard that before. That's a good one, Nathan. Yeah, true. Yeah.
And it makes you wonder what would motivate the average person to want to do that. And I have a theory I want to run by you. I think, whenever you look at like Ukraine and the threat of nuclear war, and you look at kind of terrorism and, the COVID situation, I think people might actually, I think there's a group of people that actually might prefer the natural challenges of Mars to the human challenges of Earth. And I was just wondering if you thought that might be a valid motivation for some people.
That's interesting. That is interesting. Like, right. I get what you're saying. There's a, again, I don't really know how to answer that, but I do recognize that there is a whole cadre of people who really are space kind people. And in fact, Loretta Whiteside's has that those cohorts every few months, right, to study and to be a space kind person. And fundamental to that is actually learning how to really be comfortable with yourself and accept yourself, which I think is why she has been so successful. I'm signing up for that. I didn't get to do it this time, but I actually have every intention to do it in January, because the people I've met who have gone through that program, they are very bonded to one another, and they are also very rooted and centered in their human beingness, which is it's kind of a paradox, isn't it? It's like the more of a human being you are, the more ready you would be to travel into space, which I find very interesting. So you know, and I guess just you know, I don't want to ramble, but I would say that we need to not take our problems of humanity into space if we're gonna go there, you know. There was somebody from Axiom who actually at a recent conference said something really great, something to the effect of, if it's human beings we're taking to space, how are we gonna have you know, how are we gonna have like peaceful humanity there? So it was something to that effect. So it's kind of like, we need to get our house in order before we start taking our crap all over the universe, you know, in essence.
Yeah, it's challenging. Though, you know, I think, you know, going to Mars creates kind of like a filter, and then also kind of like a completely different situation. So the people that want to go to Mars from Earth, and the people who are actually in Mars, I think you're going to see a lot of transformations occur in order for them to survive. So if you were to look out at the future, say 200 years, what does it look like to you? Are we still here?
Oh, yes, I am a pragmatist and an optimist. I do feel that you know, right now I'm very I've done a deep dive into fusion energy, and I really do feel that it's the thing that's going to unlock the next phase of living on Earth as a clean, abundant energy. So it's going to answer the climate, so, you know, the climate, it's going to be the climate solution for the climate crisis. And two, it's also going to, I firmly believe, if we orchestrate this, if we architect this correctly now, it's going to unlock energy as a public good. So if energy becomes a public good, like air and like water, you know, just, you know, let your imagination run wild, right? I mean, all kinds of things all kinds of good things are gonna happen for everybody on the planet. You know, people are not going to be cold, they're not going to be hungry, you know, just they're not going to lack water. I mean, there's just so many good things that are going to come from that. So that's really where I see us going. I really do feel that we're reaching a crescendo now where people are going, you know, these systems we have in place are not serving the majority, they're serving the few. So let's change things around. There's 8 billion of us here now. Let's make sure that, you know, the majority of us, if not all of us, are getting our needs met. And the lovely thing is that technology seems to be you know, able to propel us forward on that with quantum computing. That's just, you know, like, you know, spinning your head how quickly quantum computing is evolving, and also artificial intelligence and machine learning. So hopefully with those tools, that will help us, you know, accelerate these public goods innovations even more quickly. So 200 years, yeah, we have outposts in Mars. We have a sustainable habitat on the moon where they're actually growing vineyards on the moon, and vineyards in Mars. And we're able to go back and forth, maybe not in a couple of days to Mars, but yeah, we're able to kind of, you know, our world has gotten bigger, and it includes those planets. And we might have even found some life on Enceladus. You never know, in those icy oceans. There might be some kind of living, there might be fishing expeditions to Enceladus. Who knows?
Yeah, the new whaling adventure of the solar system might be there. So.
That's good. I love that. Yeah, wouldn't that be amazing? Wouldn't that be amazing? Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so I like to take a 200-year question and turn it around. Now, I realize we're only like 2-3 years into the 2020s. So you can imagine anything you want to that happens over the next 6-7 years. But if you live 200 years in the future and you thought back to the 2020s, what do you think you might remember?
The thing that I would remember most about the 2020s would be, I think, well, we're early still. So this is this is hopium, I suppose. I'm pushing here. But I would say sort of a groundswell, an upswell of consciousness in a lot of people all around the world, and that consciousness is sort of taking self-responsibility for creating a reality that they want to live in. So it's it's more than looking on the outside and for other people to fix things. It's actually realizing that there's like an evolution of consciousness from within, where people are like, okay, I've got to take responsibility for my reality, and then I need to take actions to work with others and collaborate with others to make those desires a reality for the collective good. So I would say an upswell of human consciousness. Yeah, that's what I would say.
That would be could be transformational. We'll see. Would you take a trip to space if you could?
Oh, I would, yes, I would. Yes, I would. But I would not, if somebody offered me a ticket, I have a couple of friends that I would want to see go first, because I know that it's just something inside of them. I mean, they just have to go. So it would give me much more pleasure to see them fulfill that dream. Whereas for me, I'm interested, and it's not fear. It's not like, oh, you go first and let's see if you come back alive. It's not that at all. It's just that it's a desire, but it's not a burning desire, like I hear talked about from some of these space kind people who for them it really is a burning desire. But yeah, I mean, one day if I get to ride on SpaceX one day, I'll be a happy camper.
How far would you consider going? Just to orbit? Maybe a week trip to the moon? Or would you consider being one of those Martian settlers?
So yeah, fun question. I do not think I would be a Martian settler, even if I lived long enough, which I'm not sure that I will, to see that happen. Not that I'm ill or anything. It's just that I'm older. I'm in my 50s. So, just because also too, I think that as you kind of touched on a moment ago, I think that the human species is going to have to evolve once to adapt to that, to adapt to that environment. So it's going to be a lifetime investment, maybe even a generational investment, if people start having offspring and stuff there. To the moon. Okay, so yeah, I think to the moon would be great. I mean, I joked a moment ago about getting a babysitter for the kids and taking your spouse to the moon, but I think I do think that that's quite in reality, especially with things that the Axiom Space and SpaceX and ULA and people like that are doing. And then also there's a space architect that I was working with earlier last year, who had designed like a space yacht. So it's a spaceship, but it's more in a yacht, like we know of as big ships, right? That are luxury liners. And so he designed conceptually this space yacht where you go on this trip. So rather than a cruise liner going to the Bahamas, you go on this space liner and you cruise around the Earth and you cruise around the moon and you have a nice spa on there and you have good food. And so it's like it's a space yacht. And I think that's going to be, I believe that's going to be a reality at some point for sure. Yeah.
I just had this vision of, you know how you go to those sushi places and they have the little trains that take the sushi dishes, around, you pick it up and, then you eat it and you pay for it. I just thinking, if you're in weightlessness, maybe you do something like air currents and they're just like floating through the air,
Oh, I love that.
So you just pick it out. Yeah.
That's cool.
You mentioned multi-generational thing, and that sprung a thought. I just want to get your take on this. So that first generation that goes there, they want it to go. That second generation, they didn't get much say in the matter. Do they go? Do they care? Do they like grow up and go, wow, I'm so glad I'm like the first Mars-born generation? Or do they kind of grow up and go, oh my gosh, what did my parents do? Earth is the place to be. I mean, like, how do you think that first generation that's born on Mars kind of reacts to their situation?
Yeah, interesting. Well, as so many studies have proven, sort of what you put into the human mind is, the human mind is quite, it's quite malleable. A lot of studies have proven that. So I would imagine it would be a question of education. So if the kids are raised with the belief that they are pioneers and they are the first of their kind and they are special, then I believe that's what they're going to believe. If there's lots of people coming from Earth, say every week and saying, oh my God, this place sucks, why aren't you back on Earth? Then maybe that would impact. So I think it would boil down to, I think, what's the recurring data input. And I believe that it would be able to be, I hate to say it, but I think you'd be able to manipulate that. I mean, I don't want to sound like, but it seems like if that's all if that, like Eskimos and igloos, if that's all you're not going to know to dream about the white sand beaches of Hawaii, right? Because you don't know that.
That's true. Well, Paige, I know we talked about a lot of things, and I see this sort of like a time capsule for the future. And I want to give you an opportunity to talk about anything you wanted to talk about. Is there anything that you want to talk about that we didn't touch on?
Well, actually, Nathan, thank you. We covered a lot. I mean, we covered a lot, from fusion to Mars to to the NASA Artemis launch. Maybe if there's one last little cherry on top that I would love to interject, and that is that I really do feel that the Artemis generation, this Artemis program, is really opening up space exploration for so many people. And it's like, it's no longer, how Ms. Thompson Blackwell Thompson kept saying, we're going together, right? Apollo, we went alone, but this time we're going together. So I do believe that anybody listening who's like, hey, that's kind of cool, I want to know more about that, I want to learn more about that, maybe I even want to contribute some of my skills to what this is all about, I would say, don't block yourself. Don't tell yourself no. Explore, find a way to contribute. NASA has got so many great programs, from citizen scientists to educational programs. If you're a teacher, that you can employ in the classroom. There's all kinds of challenges. They did this thing leading up to the launch, like the moon shot, the moon photo. People contributed from all over. So don't feel left out, or don't feel like it's not something that is for others but not for you. It is for you. It is for you. The moon and the stars belong to all of us. So and also, actually, and just one last thing I'd love to say is that we built Frontier DAO. We built an outer space virtual museum, which is open to everybody. You can access it through your web browser. I can share a link, somehow, or it's pinned to our Twitter at Frontier DAO. But basically, you can jump in and you can look at this museum of all these really cool images having to do with space exploration and outer galaxies and rocket launches and NASA videos and stuff. And it's a good way to familiarize yourself with what's going on and just kind of feel immersed a little bit. You can also do meetups. Anybody can do meetups in there. So if you have a bunch of friends, you just want to hang out in a virtual world, anybody's welcome. You're more than welcome to come and use it.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'll be sure and add the link to the post for this video so they can go. Cool. Well, Paige, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time. It was a pleasure to get to talk to you. And I hope you have a good rest of your day.
Oh, Nathan, thank you so much for having me on. This is so gracious of you. And your questions were fabulous. Really makes people think. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.